Microsoft Ignite's coming up. Microsoft are pretty sure that cloud's a big deal. We're pretty sure cloud's a big deal. But I guess today we're just going to chat a bit about why that's the case and what we're seeing. And I think to kind of start things in a slightly different place to where perhaps these conversations would start, in some of the surveys we've been looking at, 71% of organizations are looking to use cloud in order to drive their sustainability projects.
I think cloud is a big thing, but right now sustainability is an even bigger thing. If we look at the market in 2010, it was predicted that the internet in general would account for about 5% of global carbon emissions. How massively wrong did they get that? This was before hyperscale computing, before big data, before AI, before all of these things which are running up massive carbon footprints from the data center that we see today. And actually conservative estimates from some leading analysts estimate around 15% of global carbon emissions will be caused by internet services and cloud and data centers by 2025. So I think it's absolutely right to be focusing on carbon emissions of our data center and of our technology workloads. But it's important to remember that actually renewable energy is still something that you can't buy as renewable energy. Once renewable energy providers put that into the grid, it just becomes energy and you consume it as energy. So Microsoft's statistic, around 95% of their data centers being powered by renewable energy is actually being powered by renewable energy certificates, which means that they can offset the energy that they buy with the certificates provided to them by the renewable energy providers. What's more important, I think, is knowing that there's actually a drive to do that, and there's other sustainability areas that Microsoft are looking at. Zero waste is one of them. There's a massive amount of waste that goes with data centers. They still have hardware refreshes,
Exactly, and I think, as we can all see in the news and the media with everything going on in the world, the energy mix in the UK and every other country is still, generally speaking, a very, very long way from being wholly renewable. So, Microsoft and others are kind of taking great strides to become as environmentally aware as possible. But it's a big journey for lots of us. And I guess, but that said, the power and the size and the scale that they can operate at has got to be a beneficiary as well, because they can consolidate more and do more. If you think about our business, other organizations, if we all had data centers of our own, sat in isolation doing their own thing, and you extrapolate that out, that's got to be nowhere near as efficient as working with Microsoft and driving down and the economies of scale and all of that kind of stuff and the focus that they have.
If we all had generators outside our houses to power our lights, how inefficient would that be? That's kind of the same as every organization operating their own data center today. So I think, in summary, Microsoft are massively invested in reducing their energy bill, not just through clean energy and not just through renewables, but also in bringing more data center efficiencies, making more efficient kit and buying more efficient kit. Can you imagine what the energy cost for Azure is? If they can shave 5, 10, 15% off that, there's a massive saving. The key thing, though, is their ability to report on it. A lot of organizations are going to have to start reporting on their carbon emissions, and trying to do that internally in a data center world would be nigh on impossible. You'd need teams of people to do it, you'd need tooling in place to do it, and you need to really figure out the minutiae. But the fact that Microsoft actually provides carbon emission reports, dashboards, and tooling to help organizations meet their green ops, that's a brilliant thing for them, and that's why people are looking at cloud to meet their carbon strategy.
Yeah, exactly. This stuff isn't PR anymore. It's for the sustainability of business and all of us, not just a tick box and a nice piece of paper. This stuff is meaningful, and it matters to all of us and the future of all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so next up, actual technology.
Data repatriation.
Yeah, 80% of organizations are supposedly looking at data repatriation from the cloud.
Sure. Data repatriation, what does it mean? Organizations are actually now looking at where they put their workloads in terms of cloud workloads and whether the cloud is the right place for those workloads. I think one key thing to remember is that the cloud is brilliant, right? The value proposition of cloud is amazing. Really fast access to technology that you would never be able to build in a data center environment just enables infinite growth for startups, scale-ups, and even organizations operating hyperscale platform. But I think the reason why this statistic has come about is because now organizations have hit that steady state. They've realized that actually maybe wholesale cloud wasn't the right strategy to do in the first place, and that steady state stuff doesn't necessarily need to live in more expensive environments.
Yeah, I think the thing I always say is, putting your VMs in someone else's data center isn't delivering innovation. And so if that's kind of a primary driver, and there may be good reasons for that, so it's not to totally kind of poo-poo that as a reason to move to the cloud, but I think it underlines you need to carefully think about why you're doing these things and what your drivers are behind it. Sure. And if it's kind of to just get into the cloud, you may find the costs unpalatable and not have kind of done that due diligence to really understand why you're doing it and what the drivers are behind it.
Well, you've got to tie in a migration strategy with a modernization strategy. When people go and just put their stuff somewhere else, it normally costs more than having it run and depreciate in a data center in the first place. So you think about the cloud migrations that we see, right? OpEx is analyzed, CapEx is analyzed, staff costs might be analyzed. All of these different sort of like time to innovate statistics are analyzed through business cases when people migrate to the cloud. But one thing that is never looked at is actually the pressure that having things running in an OpEx environment, in an environment where things are at your fingertips to deploy, what kind of pressure does that put on your margins, and what kind of pressure does that put on your market capitalization? So this stat, around 80% of organizations are looking at data repatriation. I think what we're not saying is that all organizations are looking at leaving the cloud. So far from that. That's not what it's saying here. What it's saying is, actually, where's the steady state? Where does it make sense to, if that workload's going to be the same, that's never going to be innovated on, where does it make sense to take that and maybe purchase it a different way in cloud? Where does it make sense to actually look at a different home for that? And that's where the stats come from.
Yeah, and I think the stat and the percentages are kind of a little pinch of salt needs to be taken with them, because when you read the articles, a lot of the kind of the talking heads that are quoted are vendors and technology and solutions providers who have a certain vested interest in their continuing to be data centers within customers. But nonetheless, we certainly see that as Bytes with our customers. Good big customers who are doing really clever, big, amazing things in the cloud are still taking the view of these workloads, they just don't make sense for whatever the reason may be, time, effort, cost, risk, and let's just maintain them, like you said, in a steady state, known costs, and keep them working, and then we can focus on the next and deliver the next up in the cloud.
Absolutely. Use the cloud and use the benefits of the cloud to add the most amount of value. Don't be pulled between keeping the lights on and delivering value to your business, and be kept sort of in this world of keeping the lights on by your access to skills, your resistance to change internally, the risks of doing new things. A lot of people operate in the lights on environment because that's what they know and that's what they trust, and they don't want to try something new. Try and change that and try and innovate on that. Use more cloud services, if anything, for the things that are going to add the most amount of value to your business. Reducing time to market, delivering new services, exceeding customer expectations, those kind of things that are absolutely possible in cloud.
Yeah. I think that value to business bit is key.
Yeah.
What identifying that and understanding that.
Yeah. I mean, look, file shares containing photos of the last 6 Christmas parties. Innovate on that if you want, but how much value is that really going to provide?
Control-Alt-Delete is probably the safest thing for those.
Safest thing for everything.
Exactly.
Kubernetes adoption. Lots of articles saying it's slowing down.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Kubernetes for the last few years has been, this is the future. This is what everybody's going to do. This is what everybody's going to adopt. And it's going to be fantastic, and it's going to be wonderful, and it's going to drive and deliver huge modernization across the enterprise. But I think what we're seeing is perhaps not slowing down, but a kind of a moderation of the growth. And I think there's probably a few reasons for that, isn't there?
Well, I think if you had surveyed our customers 5 years ago, maybe 5% had significant investments in Kubernetes. Since then, I think statistics are showing that industry-wide, about 30% of organizations have an investment of over $500,000 a year in Kubernetes. But I think it's it's had its adoption phase in the development life cycle, but it's not had its adoption phase in the enterprise production life cycle, because, again, the value proposition of Kubernetes is incredible. Let's decouple any dependencies on operating system and virtual machine to allow developers to do things really quickly, really easily, deliver time to value. And that's a really incredible metric for a developer who's oftentimes paid on delivering products, delivering features, delivering new services, and fixing things once they go into production. The problem is, the IT managers that I speak to, at least, are terrified about that. They don't want people to be able to spin up and spin down environments on the fly. And that's where the friction between development and operation begins. And we were close to fixing that with DevOps, right? DevOps is a great strategy to fix that. Let's combine development and operations and make everyone align on that. The problem is, unless you are a massive hyperscale organization that's delivering TV shows to end users every day on these platforms, and you can pay for all of the lovely perks that these DevOps teams have and attract that talent and attract those kind of people to come and work for you, you can't get the right skills internally who understand DevOps enough to be able to operate in that kind of environment. Yeah,
like we said a few times, it's about doing things for the right reasons. And Kubernetes, if you're Johnny McConstruction Co., do you need to be adopting containers? You'd have kind of question why. Like you said, if you're a web scale company or have aspirations to be a web scale company, then embedding things like containerization into a DevOps process has huge benefits and could be a huge boon to your business and generally move things forwards and allow you to get code out quicker to your customers, be ahead of the game, deliver, innovate constantly. But if you are a construction company, whilst now technology is at the core of every business, it's a very different thing. It might be at the core of your business, but in getting more productivity out of your end users rather than servicing web scale customers. So you have to strike the balance and understand why you're adopting something and why you're trying to put in a process to adopt it.
Well, I think the thing about that is, in a lot of IT organizations or a lot of enterprise organizations that have enterprise IT teams, the development headache that you solve with Kubernetes causes a few headaches further down the line for other teams, right? So yes, you've made your developers' lives easier, but you've created a nightmare for whoever purchases your IT infrastructure, or you've created a nightmare for your security team. CISOs are saying to us constantly, they don't understand how they can keep the same security strategy that they've had for the last year or so relevant in a world where infrastructure environments are being spun up and spun down on the fly that no one really has any control over, that they don't know who they belong to. Same for cloud optimization. We do loads of stuff around cloud optimization for cloud environments, hyperscale environments, serverless environments, and Kubernetes is always the one thing that people are coming to us and saying, we don't understand this. We don't understand how to track it, log it, assign it to a business unit, and figure out any sort of shared costs or anything like that. So we do a lot of work unpicking that for organizations. So that headache that you solve for the developers creates multiple headaches further down the line for the average IT company.
In some ways, it was kind of like the beginning of microservices, wasn't it? Like, now Microsoft and Azure, there's kind of almost things off the shelf that can deliver that kind of microservice type environment into production, whereas kind of containerization was a little bit more bespoke and building your own kind of thing, which again, like we said, is not necessarily right for every company.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as easy nowadays to hire Power Platform developers, Microsoft 365 developers who can develop using that Microsoft ecosystem that are going to solve some of your actual real business challenges for your internal IT users. Kubernetes is great at external online platforms, but actually if you took a look at most organizations' internal IT, developing on Kubernetes, I think it is stale at the moment, as is to this stat, because people are looking to the Microsoft suite of tools to be able to deliver that innovation internally.
Yeah, so perhaps not slowing, but plateauing.
Plateauing, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. I don't think it's going anywhere. But I think people are no longer seeing that as the only paintbrush to paint the wall with. They've got multiple paintbrushes in there.
You'd work one of those in there. Another stat. 71% of businesses are struggling to hire IT professionals. Probably not a particularly surprising stat. Businesses across every sector, in every area of their business are struggling to hire, and IT's no different. We're seeing it in lots of businesses, and we're trying to kind of flex and react to that. We've seen for a few years, actually, before the skills gap, that lots of companies were kind of looking to insource, and lots of good reasons for that, but it kind of only exasperates the need to kind of hire and find people. So we've looked at a few different ways to help customers with that, haven't we?
Sure. So I think it's one thing to understand the risks of insourcing and weigh them up against the costs of outsourcing. You know, if you insource, yes, you skill up your internal teams, and you might be able to send people on courses. You might be able to get your IT team who know and understand your IT estate to be able to deliver cloud platforms. The problem with that is they might not have done it before, or they might have limited experience, and they fundamentally don't know what they don't know, right? And it's one of the things that we're saying to our customers all the time is, there's 2,000 pages to the cloud adoption framework. Do you really want your IT team reading all of them to see what options are available for delivering landing zones, delivering migrations, modernization opportunities? Or do you want to, have some expertise on your team to be able to say, look, we've done it like this before, and here's what we would recommend for an organization like yours. Conversely, what you want to avoid is completely outsourcing everything, right? I've worked with countless organizations who have said, we outsource this to a third party, and now we don't know what it is. They've handed over a black box. We don't know how to support it. We don't know how to run it. If something goes wrong, we need to call them up and pay quite a lot of money to get things fixed in an environment that they built. And so organizations are constantly trying to battle between insourcing and skilling their teams up and outsourcing and paying the price for that.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because like you say, on the face of it, getting someone to just go and do it and make it happen and get it done for you is incredibly appealing. But of course, the getting it done for you is actually just the beginning of delivering that service. The service is there to make your end users more productive, drive revenue streams, be constantly innovated against, which ultimately you really need to understand your business, and it's hard for someone else to truly understand your business in the way that someone internally can understand your business. Just handing someone and getting it done gets you to a point, but actually that's just the beginning of kind of that technology being deployed and adopted within your organization, really.
Sure. I mean, conversely to that, once you do have that adoption in your organization, we have people at Bytes who it's their full-time job to stay in touch with Microsoft releases and Microsoft new products and new services. If your team are focused heavily on keeping the lights on in your organization, how are they going to be focused around driving the innovation that you moved to cloud for in the first place? So taking a blended or code-delivered approach is probably the best way forward. That's where organizations will be able to choose how much support they need from a third party. It's something that our engineers speak quite a lot about, is that at the outset of a project, they'll be heavily involved with their customers that they're working with. They'll be showing them how to do things, but it'll be very much them in the cockpit flying the plane. Whereas, as time goes on and the customers that they're working with get more familiar with the controls, with what's going on, they start handing off a little bit more control to them, and that lets organizations really choose, what are we ready to take on? What are we ready and happy and comfortable to do, knowing full well that there's someone else in the seat next to them if something goes wrong, as a sort of safety net.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, our role is to work with them to deliver services that help them, but then also look at technology and products that we can augment our skills, their skills, and get more done with less across both organisations, and work kind of hand in hand to get things done, so they can crimp the pie whilst it's baking in the oven.
Well, I think it's important to remember why it's so hard to hire IT skills at the moment, and it's because the cloud is so new. It's not like a massive hardware provider that's been building hardware for the last 30 years. It's just not that. And so finding good people with experience that aren't already working for people and enjoying their job, because if they weren't, they would have left and worked somewhere else, such as Microsoft or such as a consultancy partner or something like that. It's really hard to attract that talent to come and work for, your construction firm example that you gave earlier. It's difficult to do that. So you're left either hiring from a pool of people who might not have the same experience as them, a pool of people who might not be as good as them, or paying a lot of money to tempt people away from these companies. And it's a really tough challenge for IT leaders, and it's something that we speak about quite a lot, and a challenge that we solve.